I'm Pamela Webb from University of Minnesota, one of the co-chairs of the Expanded Clearinghouse, along with
Lynette Arias from the University of Washington. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome. We have an enormous amount to cover this afternoon, so we're going to launch right in. You can see the names of the speakers, and you get a sense of how much we've got to cover for today. But we really, we want to go through, these are the topics that we're going to be sharing with you today, but we want to get right to the exciting news. And that is that the FTP Expanded Clearinghouse has successfully completed its pilot, and we have moved out of pilot mode, and we're very pleased to say that the executive committee has now named us an ongoing subcommittee of the Research Administration Committee, so we're now an ongoing initiative of the FTP, and you all are an ongoing initiative of the FTP. And we do look very much, though, to the executive committee because they have been such a huge help to this project, and they're going to continue to be, and we're going to share a little bit this afternoon with what exactly it is we're asking of them. Now, we've also changed, took the opportunity to change from our pilot working group arrangement that we've had for the last couple of years into a steering committee that can help guide the future of the FTP Expanded Clearinghouse. And we want to take this opportunity to introduce you to the people that have been named to that steering committee. And those of you that are here, will you stand when I call your name? Courtney Swaney, Denise Moody, Chris Renner, I know Michael's not here, Julie Thatcher, Neil Hunt, Robert Prentice, Webb Brightwell, Sarah Clow, Leslie Smith-Sinberg, Jennifer Rodas, and Amanda Haymaker. So please take the opportunity to thank these people for all the work that they're doing. You can see the way that we have set this up, and in future meetings, you will be hearing from one or more of these groups, and as well as on the listserv as they fulfill the various responsibilities that you have. We've put a lot of thought into how to make this viable for the long term, and you'll see some of that planning as we continue today. Another piece of good news, our final pilot report is now on the FTP website. We've given you the link there. These slides, remember, will be available after the presentation. We also have a brand new press release that just went up 2 days ago, and that is intended for your use back at your institutions, as well as some uses we're making of it nationally to announce the results of the pilot and to share the importance of what the FTP Expanded Clearinghouse can do. We also wrote a feature-length article for Encura's magazine. That is just about to be published sometime next week, we've told. So if you're a member of Encura, you will automatically get that article. But we also will have some PDF copies available for people that are interested in doing that. That goes into a lot of the history and how we got through the pilot and what we learned in the pilot, and then where we're headed in the future. We've been doing all kinds of presentations, and you may have seen these at your spring regional research administrator meetings. There are more requests coming in for us to go out and talk to people about the clearinghouse. One of the exciting ones I felt is I had a chance to actually show this to some IG auditors. And on a subboard audit, and that was a kind of a neat thing and they were intrigued by what this looks like and what we're able to achieve with this.
It's my turn. So, hi everybody. We wanted to just review for you. That seems really loud. Loud for you guys? Okay. We just wanted to review the recommendations that we had made in the pilot report to the executive committee and give you a quick status on where those are. And so you'll remember that we recommended that we go ahead and invite the rest of the FTP members into the clearinghouse. We recommended that it be considered to be mandatory for every FDP member to be a part of the clearinghouse. And then we recommended ongoing development. So that includes small to medium enhancements and bug fixes. So keeping the developers working on that, and then developing the API, and continuing to work towards piloting the financial questionnaire, which you'll hear about later, and potentially move it into the clearinghouse. And so that's principally for, well, mainly for non-single audit entities. And then, you know, we really asked, can we keep going? Can we start thinking about long-term planning and what all we could use the clearinghouse for? How do we need to enhance it? Explore the options about if we want to include non-FTP members and what that means. So, let's see. So a little update on all of those. So we did invite the 43 members into the clearinghouse, and we've got just about everybody in there. So we hit 200 profiles the other day, and I, for one, was very excited about that. I don't know, I just felt like 200 was another milestone number. So we still have a few that are considering, and we've actually heard from pretty much all of these listed, and so we don't intend to call these out, you know, and shame them or anything. No, not at all. Columbia has committed. All right. I know. Because look, the more the merrier. Come on, Stephanie, Renata.
There will, however, be a front row reserve section for anyone that's not in by next time.
Yeah. And so we've been adding these one by one. Remember, we warned you we weren't doing it in a cohort anymore, so you needed to keep an eye on who was being added. So just to remind you, you can do that by going to the participating orgs section where you look at the profiles, and there's a column for last published on. You just click on that, it sorts chronologically backwards. You can see who are new or what are the updated profiles. So that's how you can see. But again, we've got just about everybody in there now. Oh, what did I just do then? On the question of the participation in the clearinghouse being mandatory, that's still being considered. If we get all of the FDP members in there, it's a moot point for now, but it'll be something that'll be considered going into the next phase. So that's where we are with that. The continued development goes on, and so again, we're still working on little enhancements here and there and bug fixes. Chris is going to come up and talk about where we are with the API. We're just about to launch that. And then Leslie and Sarah will talk about the financial questionnaire and where we are with that. So just a little bit on the future planning. And so again, we've talked about this, you know, probably in the last couple sessions, but we really needed to get our ducks in a row. We needed to close out the pilot, get that report done, really get the blessing to become or to evolve to a more permanent subcommittee and steering committee structure. And then we're still, I would say, just a little bit stabilizing and standardizing our processes to maintain it. As you've heard from both of us over all these sessions, we're very committed to the integrity of the system. I mean, it's a wonderful system and that's great, but if the data in it goes out of date or you know, isn't accurate, kept current, then it doesn't help all of you guys. So we're very focused on the processes that we have, the automated notifications and the human processes that we use to keep it up to date. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but we've been very focused on that. So now we're moving to, really after this meeting, we'll get much more into thinking about the future of the clearinghouse. And again, that's things like the mandatory use and inviting potentially non-FDP members in. I will just say again, and we've talked about this before again, there's just lots of considerations to this. There is a fair amount of maintenance that goes into keeping this clearinghouse up to date. And right now it's very tied to the two of us, and that's not sustainable and that's not a good thing for all of us. So that's part of why we've built the steering committee to help support it, and we really, really need to be thoughtful about allowing non-FDP members in. It has pros and cons for sure, and so we'll really be detailing that out, the pros and cons, and talking to all of you. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to talk about it today, but talking to the executive committee more about those pros and cons and options. And then, of course, it's time, we think, to talk to the feds more. So we were just in the session about sam.gov. So we're going to be branching out and talking to different federal agencies about what do they think of this, and is this something that we've proven out works really well now? This is what we need. This is all the information we need in one place. So we don't have to go all over the place. Is there something they can partner with us on to somehow move this potentially into the government somewhere? So as you can imagine, that won't be a quick conversation, and we'll keep you up to date about that as it goes. Again, the financial questionnaire, we'll talk more about that. And then there are other sections of the FDP webpage that might make sense to roll in. We haven't talked about it lately, but of course there's the hugely successful FCOI clearinghouse with well over 1,000 entries. So we need to decide what to do with that, but of course that's a whole bunch of non-FDP people, so we'll have to think through that. And then we'll talk a little bit today about the data and the ownership of that and what that means. And so I think we really need to think through that, and I'm interested in some of your initial thoughts today.
So what we've learned from doing this now for about 2 years is what the areas are where people struggle to keep their profiles current, or when they're doing their updates, maybe they're still not getting them quite right. And so we thought it might be useful, the first time, right? So we thought it might be useful to just highlight some of the areas where, and some suggestions and tips for how to keep your profile current with the minimal amount of pain. I think most people know they're getting the automated reminders when dates are about to expire. If you aren't, please send an email to FDP EC Help, because you should be getting those at this point. One thing we've figuring out that when you do update your SAM record, it's a really good idea to just make it part of your normal business process to go in and update your profile with your updated SAM registration number right then, registration date, I mean. So that you've got a normalized business process for keeping your profile current and don't have to rely on the reminders that your date is going stale. This was the first year that we went full through the audit update process. And so we'll be looking at that as a target area for ways we might be able to refine the way we're asking the questions or putting the data in a little bit. But we have learned that that it's really important to not just put in your most current audit and your most current audit year, but to make sure that you get what was your current audit moved down to the field that's your most recent past audit, so that gets in. And we've noticed that some people may be handing off this process or getting a file from a different office and may not recognize they've inadvertently grabbed their financial statement audit instead of their single audit. Now, a lot of people have them combined, but not everybody. And so we're reviewing those to make sure as part of our review process, to make sure the right file is already in the system. In addition to just keeping contacts current, then we are becoming more, I would say, active in terms of our behind-the-scenes review of making sure that if there are dates that are stale in the system, or if there is information, particularly audit information, that's out of date, we will be contacting people to ask them to do that. And we have kind of created a little escalation process for when people are not responding within a reasonable period of time. You know, it's not an issue if it's a week or two, unless it's debarment and suspension, of course. But it's not an issue. But if it goes on and on and on, or if it seems like it's stuck somewhere, like stuck it with a certifier, then we'll come back and work with you to try to make sure that the profile remains current. And I think a lot of that does really have to do with the concern that the information stays absolutely up to date and stays current. And we want to make sure that's valid for everybody. Oops. Okay. So to give you a sense, we were able for the first time to collect data about how frequently profiles were getting updated. So we know that 550 updates were made, either new profiles created or existing profiles updated in the last 12 months. So basically about 2.5 times, in essence, the number of profiles that we have. So people are doing a really good job, and we thank you too for keeping the profiles current. It also means Lynette and I at one point were going, criminy, I just walked away for 2 hours and there's 6 more waiting for me. And that's, it felt right to see that kind of number with it. We did do 149 rejections for corrections. So if you're getting those emails back, that's why. So that's part of why we put that list together. That might help you some of the more common challenges that we're seeing. We're looking at this, if we ever go to adding non-FTP organizations, we have to find a way that this can be done, this validation and review process, in a more automated way. And so part of it, because Chris and the programming team have been so terrific with this, are there ways that we can use the system to do things like check for bad hyperlinks, check for bad dates, and send instant notices, that type of thing. We're just looking field by field to see if there's a way that we can make more and more of these validations on an automated basis rather than a person having to review them. And then finally, we did update the sample pushback language. So if you are still getting subrecipient commitment forms from another participating entity, but they're asking you to complete a commitment form, we have new and updated language with the hyperlink right there so that you can push back. And chances are, again, it's just information didn't get to the person, all the way flowed down, all the way through their system to the person who's actually sending out that form. We're getting less of it than we started with, but it is still occurring a little bit. Question? Yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify though, the issue isn't necessarily requesting a commitment form, it's requesting one that is not project-specific information, right?
Correct, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so
that's a great clarification.
Project-specific information.
Right. There's not the expectation, as you'll recall, and in the business agreement, is that you won't ask for information that's already on your profile. You are welcome to ask for information that's on a project-by-project basis, not in your profile, that you still need to have. We do ask everybody, though, remember there is a sample letter of intent out there on the website for use at proposal stage. We do ask that people minimize as much as possible at proposal stage for the reasons we all know really well, that not all of those proposals are going to get funded. So we can ask that later when we know that project is going to be awarded. But that choice is up to you. The only absolute requirement is it can't duplicate what's in your profile. The other thing, David told us about how the FTP website is being updated. We are also going through and updating the expanded Clearinghouse webpage. And part of that is just we are now, since we're past pilot stage, we're removing and archiving a lot of the pilot information and making it a new, cleaner, crisper information we need to have as an ongoing initiative type of page. So you're going to see that. We have done instructions and videos. We're continuing to do, we have, I think, 3 more videos that we're going to be doing. So if you're the type of user who wants to learn how, or you have somebody new at your institution taking on profile creation, for example, or updating, you'll be able to go in and use these videos if you want to. And that will be important if, again, we expand beyond FTP. We'll need to have a way that we can get information in the hands of people quickly.
Just real quick before we go on to the next section, couple things to add, and then I wanted to do a quick check-in with you all. So on the pushback language, I'd also like to encourage you, so for the people that might be sending you forms that aren't FDP members or in the Clearinghouse, you can always point them to your profile and encourage them to use that and not fill out the form. Of course, you can't, you can try and push it, but they aren't part of the agreement that they won't send you forms. But I really encourage you to try and do that. We've heard from a lot of institutions that are, they include the link to their profile on their letter of intent, things like that. So that's how we can get the word out too, because just because they can't join doesn't mean they can't use the profiles. So we think we're going to end up with about 204, 206 is the total number. So that's a lot of institutions that everybody can look at the profile.
I have a question. So for the annual evaluation and now UG audit questionnaire, are we also supposed not to send out a questionnaire to each the other entities or everything?
The annual audit questionnaire that we used to send, yes, that went away, but actually it's supposed to go away regardless of whether you're a member of the clearinghouse, if you're a single audit entity, because that information is in the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, and the UG says that that's the place one should go to obtain that information. So that's what people are asked to do now, and regardless. But of course, in this case, that audit information is all in your profile, so there shouldn't be a need to ask for that annual certification.
And then the other entity is not a current member that the clearinghouse can refer them to create a profile here.
Yes.
And use them.
Yeah.
Well, they can view your profile, but they can't create one yet.
For themselves.
Right. Not until, well, those 4 institutions that we listed, you can encourage them, particularly Columbia. So switching topics. I just wanted to do a quick check-in. So the things that Pamela talked about with updating the profiles, again, we're happy to help right now, and this has become part of our jobs, but it's really all of you guys that it becomes really important to keep your profiles up to date, current, accurate. So is there any problems anybody's seeing with that you want to share with us right now about updating your profiles? Because the more we put this on us, the more time consuming it is. We don't really want to go that direction. So don't rely on us to catch things. Nick, go ahead. Right here. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. It's an internal issue. We are so decentralized that the person who does our SAM registration doesn't tell me when they update it. When we get our single audit completed, they don't always send it to me. And because I'm the person who updates our clearinghouse profile. So what I'm finding is our biggest issue internally is just getting somebody to notify you when those things are done, because everybody just kind of holds on to them.
Okay. We maybe could think of things like, so we'll be turning to some more enhancements and again, automated notifications. So, we have some other contacts in the system that, I'm just throwing this out, thinking out loud, we could copy other people on notifications potentially. If enough of you guys have that problem where it's different people doing it, we've got the audit contact maybe for that. If we create an audit notification, we could copy them or something. So think about things like that, and if you ever think something like that would be useful, let us know. There was someone back there first. Did you saw the?
I was going to ask the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But what I was going to say is that I have been getting the notifications. The system did send me emails for both of my institutional profiles.
Mm-hmm.
And the big red flag there says that the doctor is fired
Mm-hmm.
in the profile. But the concern that I have is that even though I'm a central person and I have reached out to the office that handles the updated, for example, animal insurance, they haven't gotten a response from the government if they submitted their, so I just wanted to have some assurance that even though that assurance is not updated yet, if it doesn't, get renewed before it expires, is there any, repercussion for?
One thing I would encourage is if you know something's pending, go ahead and update your profile and add that comment. There's a comment box on every page. You can add that, and that at least gives people that are reviewing your profile a little bit of an update.
Yeah. We're aware that the date has expired, but we will update it as soon as it's provided, right? And then put a trigger for yourself to keep looking, although we'll help you with that.
And then just real quick before I forget, the other thing I would say is if you guys are reviewing other participating organizations' profiles and you find their data out of date, please contact them and let them know. You can always contact us, but contact them and let them know. Again, we have all these automated notifications, and we have some back-end reports that we can always review what's out of date and send extra emails. But keep each other in check too. I think that would be really helpful.
I think we have time for one more question.
So I just wanted to say, there were a couple times this year where I had one thing that I knew needed to be updated, but then another thing that I knew was about to be, and so I was trying to not, for you guys and for me, that, just that we're not generating more work, but it sounds like you're saying it should err more on the side of update. Like,
If you're talking, it's coming tomorrow.
yeah.
I wouldn't worry about it, but yes, we've heard that from others too. And I think our preference would be, we're so concerned about making it viable that it's okay to just go ahead and get it current and then do it again next week or whatever.
So that's actually a good transition kind of to the next section. So related to the data integrity, and basically there's some fields I think that you guys probably find more important than other fields. So for instance, in your case, the last question, if your SAM is expired but your USDA registration, get your SAM date up to date, and split that up. So we keep that in mind as we're reviewing things too. I mean, we may actually even approve something that gets the SAM date up to date and leaves a lesser one in process. So, but we're going through a process. We have a great gentleman on our team, Robert Prentice, who is very much a data guru, and Chris and Michael have, they've built ways in the system for us to see the data. So we're going through and doing a little bit of a scrub right now. So when all the new profiles came in, there is a human element to this, and it's good, but we're humans. And there were 3 of us reviewing the new profiles that came in. So we're doing a little bit of a check to make sure there's consistency among our review, and then just be able to look at the data to see if there's slight differences in the way people answered and if we need to true some of the information up. So you might hear from us on things like, we're doing a double check back. The legal entity name in the clearinghouse should be the legal entity name in SAM, down to the thes. If you've got a the in there, get your the in there.
The Ohio State University.
Yeah,
Right.
I think I got it wrong on the slide.
What if the name in SAM isn't your legal name because of character limitation?
It's whatever you put in SAM. We've already identified at least one institution where it's not their legal name, but
It's
that's...
not ours. We
Yeah,
can do that.
but we've said, look, we are matching your DUNS number name in SAM. That's our criteria for success. And it matches because it matches what's in the UG as what we're supposed to put in for subawards, as you need the DUNS number and the name is supposed to match the DUNS. So we figured that was the most accurate for this business purpose, and that's what we're looking to do. So, but we are telling institutions if we notice that in some way, and then they can make a decision if they're going to update their SAM registration.
Yeah, we've definitely had cases where they look at it and they say, oh, that's actually not, and then they end up updating their SAM. And I think we had one case that fell into the data security issues with SAM, that there were problems because of that. So I don't know if anybody in the room had that problem, but that could come up. So with this data, we can tell things like this. So this is a map of where everybody is, all the participating organizations, and this is just April activity. So at that point, we had 195 profiles, and it shows you the unique sessions and page views. And again, some of these are Pamela and I, but not 27,688. But people are using it, and people are looking at it, and there's a high activity. So again, next steps to help us evolve, we're looking at the data, looking at the integrity, but we're looking at the fields that have been completed and how they've been completed, and whether or not that can drive us towards, should we get rid of some of these fields, or are there other ones we need? And then we've got all this data, so we've basically got almost all of the FDP members in there. So we now have a pretty robust institutional profile on all of the FDP members. So that kind of makes you start to think, what can we do with that data?
And so we have.
So here's an example of just looking at the fields and how many reply not applicable. So some of these might have, we included them in the beginning because we thought they would be useful information for people, but maybe not so much. So this is where we've talked several times about at some point we're going to send out a survey and have you guys actually vote, because you're the user community, so we're not going to make decisions about changing the system significantly now, adding fields or deleting them without you guys being able to vote or chime in on that. So this is the kind of stuff we can see. And then there's data like this. So we can actually take a look. We know that all of the FTP member institutions are single audit, subject to single audit. So we can look and say what percent have findings, what percent, had terminations or debarred. Luckily, that's a 0. Nobody's debarred in there. So this is the kind of information that the FDP could use.
Can I just say one quick thing on that, if you can go back? The other thing here, as you know, we're lobbying the federal government for audit safe harbor. So this is the kind of information that we think can be of value in trying to make that argument that, look, higher education institutions with single audits are generally speaking low risk, and to the extent they have findings, they're being managed by their audit process. But having backup to that at the level of 200 campuses of a university, now it's not everybody in the country, right? But it's still it's a large number. Hopefully this will be a sufficient sample size that it will actually be of value here as we continue to lobby for policy change.
So, you all have seen, we're famous FDP for surveying each other, asking questions about, do you have this, do you have that, what's this, what's that? So, we're also thinking about, what other information do we want to keep on a long-term basis about all the FDP members? And then again, should we add that field? So we just, a few minutes on this, take a couple comments, but I'm interested in any initial thoughts you guys have, and you can pull us over at the reception too or after and let us know, but utilizing the data, because we built the system for subrecipient entity monitoring. That was the main purpose. But now we have all this data that can support other activities at FDP. And so we're curious how you all feel about being able to use that data like that.
I just have a question regarding the audits. We're one of the holdout institutions.
Oh, where are you from?
Yeah, we're joining.
Okay.
You'll answer my question now, right?
No, I'm happy to answer your question.
The audit page, it does not provide any information if a pass-through entity is affected by another person's audit, where they're specifically named. The question says, is there, I forget the exact wording of the question, but is there another institution affected by this?
Right.
And you either answer yes or no.
Right.
But if it's yes, there's no detail.
That's
How can
correct.
every reviewer to look that up, I guess?
We made the decision not to do that because what this is, there are very many institutions where you're going to see no findings.
Right.
Okay. So it allows you for those to eliminate it because by definition, right, there's not going to be that problem. And then for those where there may be, and you need to find out if it impacts your particular award or your particular CFDA number, then you've got the link right there to their audit. So you can either go to Federal Audit Clearinghouse or you can use the link right there to go in and check the finding to determine whether or not it has a bearing on your CFDA number.
So that was a decision to not.
Correct, because the volume of information, if we were to do that, it's actually in Federal Audit Clearinghouse already, but the volume of information would be impractical, especially for systemic findings, right? Because it would potentially impact every project that you have. And the other question then is, you're also making that decision, look, the entity has a corrective action plan that it's filed with its auditors. What's your basic business practice? Do you accept the audit plan all or most of the time for an audit finding that's already in place and that already being monitored by auditors? So you could potentially have a decision locally that basically says if it's another single audit entity, I will agree to their corrective. I will accept that that's a reasonable corrective action plan. So, and that's your material decision, management decision, yeah.
And I would say too, remember
Yeah.
that the clearinghouse is not meant to completely replace your monitoring processes. It's just to help you.
Yeah.
So, and we had a really good question recently that's leading us to, we're going to be thinking again about how we can perfect that section, because I think the question was related to what if you have a finding but it's in the student financial aid cluster. So we might perfect that question to say, do you have findings in R&D?
Right.
You know, things like that. So those are
Right.
the kind of things.
Right.
Anything like that, you know,
getting
we're
it
trying to come up with those
narrower,
too,
right?
but if you have one of those ideas, just shoot it to us on the help desk and we'll add it to our enhancement list. Let's take one more and then we'll.
In a similar vein, we recently were notified by an institution after we already had some awards in place that they did have federal awards terminated for cause. And so there isn't a lot of guidance out there outside of what to do at time of proposal. But what they do say is to attach a letter of explanation when that occurs. Is there any possibility that we could allow them to upload if they disclose yes within the clearinghouse? So if they say that yes, they've had been terminated for cause, that they can upload the letter of explanation there.
Possibly.
I think that's a possibility. I think one of the questions we looked at, is there terminations for cause? I'm trying to remember if it's in here somewhere.
Environment suspension section.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it's one of the
Yeah, and
sub-questions.
so I think it's one of the things where we found every institution had marked no, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's not
Okay.
common. This is the first one that we saw.
Yeah, right,
But
and
there really
right.
isn't any guidance as to what to do then when
Yes,
it happens,
right.
when you're already
It's a good
involved.
point, yeah.
So again,
Good point.
things like that, if you could send us an email and a little bit of a business case. I think at one point we might actually create a little form where you can submit enhancement requests and little business cases to us, but right now just ship it to us in email.
Yeah.
We'll keep going here. And it's Chris's turn to give us system updates. We're going to leave you up here all by yourself.
Just abandoning me up here. All right, I guess I'll sit.
We sit with you.
It's okay. I think I'll make it. All right, so I've just got 2 or 3 slides here. So this will be brief. But as Lynette alluded to, we have some updates for you on the API as well as a couple of other updates. So the first thing, and this is just sort of an FYI, it actually shouldn't affect the users. You shouldn't see this, but we've done a rather significant kind of under the hood update. It's not live yet. It'll go live later this month. Just because the speed at which we develop things, we didn't always build things with in the most maintainable way. So we've had an opportunity to go back and work on the code that runs all of this on the site in order to make it simpler, more readable for developers. It would be gibberish to non-techies. But also it'll be more maintainable, more scalable. If we were to hand this off to somebody else, those developers will be able to come in and understand the code better. So that's going on. Like I said, just an FYI, you shouldn't see any changes in the way the site looks or works. It's all under the hood server-side stuff. The second thing I wanted to talk about, the last meeting and in between meetings, folks have requested, will there be a way to download an Excel or a CSV file that's just got all the data in it? And I know there's lots of different use cases or workflows that people want that for. We, as a steering committee, chewed on this and chewed on this and chewed on this, and we've made the decision to not offer that right now. And there's several reasons for that. First, if you need it for your system to system, the API has a method to call to get back all the profiles in one data call. So we've given you in the API a way to populate your systems with the data. So in that respect, the spreadsheet download would be kind of duplicative. Also, we're very concerned, again, this idea about integrity, we're very concerned if people can go on the site and kind of at will click and download what is basically a snapshot of the data, then that gets stored on your network drive and somebody else gets it, maybe you email it to them, and there's more of a risk that people are making decisions off of old data rather than returning to the website. We want you to go to the site and look at the profiles. And I realize that a lot of folks have mentioned that they were looking at the Excel was kind of a workflow tool. Maybe you don't have an ERA system or something sophisticated. You just want a file that you can go in and search. And we heard that. So what the intent to do, since we're not going to offer the Excel at this time, is we're going to enhance the site. So we have the page that lists all the organizations with profiles. We're going to enhance that page with additional search and sort functionality that gives you the ability to find what you need. So if you got input on what those specific features would be on that page, again, send that to the help email. If you have strong opinions about this, find me or find one of the others and let me know what the use case is and why you really need it. There may be something that we didn't consider. So we've made the best decision we think we know how to make at this time, but we're always collecting more information. So that is the other piece. The last piece, I'll move to a whole slide on the API. This thing is ready. It will go live this month. We've already issued in kind of our beta private testing phase 3 tokens to institutions that are already making calls against the API. The documentation is available on Swagger Hub. For those of you that are technical, should know what that is. It's just an API documentation hosting in the cloud thing. So requirements for access. As already been mentioned, you have to have a published profile on the site before we'll give you a token. You'll be able to submit for token access on a page on the site. I'll show you that in the next slide. The tokens will be provided. We've actually set up a separate email that's an API, FDP API help desk. And it'll actually come to me and Michael. We will validate that you've met all our requirements. We'll send you back your token along with a copy of the API business use agreement. So we're gonna log all the calls to the API. So when your system hits the API, we're gonna track the IP address and that token. So we're gonna know what schools, if you have some kind of race condition and your system makes 10,000 calls in a minute to the API, we're gonna know that, and we can call the technical contact and say, you might wanna check your system. That's why we're asking for identifying information. We're going to give you a token and we want a technical contact so we can identify who's using the API. As was mentioned before, this wasn't mentioned before, we've talked about profiles for non-members. In a similar vein, we have talked about API access for non-members. We're not doing that at this time. Still something we're considering. If you have a vendor that you're working with, you will be able to share your token with the vendor. That's all spelled out in the terms and conditions, the API business use agreement. So we're not gonna kind of cut that off. That's a critical piece for you guys, we know. Just real quick on the API, there's basically 4 methods. The first just says, give me back all the profile data for all the published profiles. So you'd get 200 plus. So that's the method that you would use to populate your systems. Once you have DUNS numbers, you can send a DUNS to the API and you get back that individual profile. Or in the rare condition, I think Wisconsin is the only, last time I checked, was the only one that has 2 profiles for 1 DUNS. In that scenario, you get back 2 results. Each profile, if you've been on the site and looked in the URL, you'll notice every profile has a unique ID, and it doesn't mean anything beyond the system, but is a way to uniquely identify each of the profiles. Once you get those, let's say you make the initial call and get all the data, now you have those IDs. If you give the API the ID, you get back that unique profile. So that's a way, if your first call with the DUNS number gets you back more than one result, you say, well, how can I get a unique profile? Use that unique ID. And then the last method will, again, supply the unique ID, and it's just going to tell you when the profile was updated the last time. So it's a pretty basic API. Like I said, there's just these 4 functions, but that should be enough to get us down the road, I think. So I mentioned asking for your token. So there is a page on the website. This page is there now, but it doesn't look like this. Once we go live, the page will be updated. Once you log in, you will see this. So the page is called Data Access. So you will go to the Data Access page, and it talks about the system-to-system API. At the bottom of that page, circled in that red box, is a link to a form. It's also on this site, so it's another page, but it is a web form. Click on that. Again, you have to be logged in, but you'll supply your name and email, the name of your technical contact, who's going to implement this API at your institution, and then check a box that you've read the terms and conditions of the API business use agreement. That sends an email to us at the new API help box, and we will email you back with your token. That's what I've got for the system.
Okay, so I'm Leslie Schmitzenberg. I hail from the University of Minnesota, and this is my colleague.
And I'm Sarah Clough from University of Texas at Austin. Hey, y'all.
So we're going to be talking about the FDP Financial Questionnaire pilot. Just go through a brief agenda, just do some kind of overview basics, of course our love for uniform guidance and why we do risk assessments, talk about the development of the financial questionnaire, the progress we've made to date, and our next step, so the pilot and also the draft financial questionnaire that we've been working on. So a little bit of an overview of that. So, why we do risk assessment, we all know we want to be good stewards of our federal funds and prevent any negative ramifications for our institutions, and very importantly, to comply with uniform guidance, which brings us to CFR 200-331, which requires that we conduct our risk assessment to evaluate whether they are going to potentially not comply with the requirements of the subaward. And typically, one of the criteria that's used to evaluate it is audit experience and some other financial management issues. So this brings us to the first place that I always go when I'm doing my risk assessments is whether they are a single audit or a financial questionnaire institution. So if they have expended $750,000 or more in federal grants or awards in the fiscal year, they're subject to single audit, and that's always frankly nice. If they are not subject to single audit, financial questionnaire is obtained as well as supporting financial documentation. The reason it's nice for single audit is because it's more publicly available. There's the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, and even better, in my opinion, is the FDP Expanded Clearinghouse. I think about those institutions that are part of their state audits. Those are a real treat to review.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I'm looking at you, Texas.
Yeah.
But conversely, how do we obtain the financial questionnaires? Right now, typically each institution has their own form, and then so each subrecipient that isn't subject to single audit has to complete that for each institution they're working with, and some of these can be small nonprofits, foreign institutions, community partners. So we really see that there's a need for national consistency, efficiency, and consensus. So looking at an FDP financial questionnaire to get to that point. To kind of summarize some of the pitfalls that we currently identified, where there was the lacking of a standardized, consistently used form. There is currently a financial questionnaire available on the FDP website, but it's really a pretty exhaustive list of all the potential questions you could ask. So saw some opportunities for improvement there. As well, there's no online repository, so the subrecipients must complete the PTE-specific form for each institution they are working with, and then it's housed locally at that PTE. And as well, something that's near and dear to my heart is there's little documented consensus, guidance on how to review the financial questionnaire. I think we all kind of come together and we view it similarly, but I think it'd be good to have it documented. So that brings us to our progress to date, and Sarah's going to discuss what we've been doing.
Right, yeah. So, and this is a beautiful timeline that Leslie put together, at least the graphic form of it. And I'm actually going to go back to the previous point. There is the example financial questionnaire on the FDP website, which that's correct. It started out as basically this exhaustive list from everyone's questionnaires. What are all of the questions that we could possibly ask? And that is actually the starting point for this working group. A number of the folks participating in this group are former participants in the risk assessment questionnaire working group, so we are intimately familiar with the process of thinking deeply about these questions. But a big goal here was to produce a document that is really useful for as many pass-through entities as possible, and also very accessible to our subrecipients. Oftentimes our foreign subs are, a bit overwhelmed by all of the terms, right? So anyway, I'm gonna keep moving quickly. We started in April of last year, convened a call. There were a couple other false starts before this. We developed the draft based on slimming down those questions, solicited a selection of feedback from both pass-through entities and subrecipients. And based on that, performed some revisions and came to kind of a good, first final draft, right? And that brings us to where we've, the bulk of what we've worked on since late last year, which is developing guidance to accompany this form. And it's two sets of guidance, actually. One set is for the subrecipients that are completing this form to help explain, why are we asking this question? What does that mean? And then the second set is for us as pass-through entities. What should you look for in the answers that you receive from your subrecipients? It can also be potentially a useful training tool that you can put in the hands of the person who's assumed this role of reviewing subrecipients at your institution. So, they know a bit more about what are the really risky things that they should be keeping an eye out for, and then based on that, what steps can they take to mitigate that risk?
Yeah, I think that's been the really interesting part, is putting together a list of potential risk mitigation tactics that you can employ.
Yes, also near and dear to my heart. This is why we work well together. And then, speaking of working well together, all of these folks have been so gracious to contribute, and we've got a number of our members here today, so thank you, everyone.
And I apologize if I missed anyone. I tried to go back and look at all of our calls, but I'm sorry if I missed anyone.
All right, so looking forward to a potential pilot, the things we really want to do are, again, demonstrating the need, sort of capturing, make the case for this sort of tool, right? We want to test the content that we've developed. Does it actually work for people? Get feedback. And ultimately, we're looking to relieve burden, so let's make sure we're actually doing that. And then looking forward to after the pilot, ultimately, as Lynette and Pamela described, we'd love to integrate this non-single audit entity piece into the expanded clearinghouse. However, we can't predict the future and don't know that all of those conversations will ultimately come to fruition. But either way, nonetheless, we think it's an immensely valuable tool that can be used by FDP members and non-FDP members alike. All right, and we'd like after this FDP meeting to send out a survey in Qualtrics, because we've got good access through UT, and mostly we'd like to measure interest, what some challenges would be, and actually, as a fun fact, Robert Prentice of aforementioned Data Guru fame recently tracked down a really cool data set at usaspending.gov that might actually help us answer the first 3 or 4 questions here without bugging you all for that. So I'm just going to take a real quick temperature check. What are some thoughts or questions that y'all have right now?
Not all at once.
It's okay, you're thinking. I know.
Yeah,
It's a lot
it's a
to
lot.
take in. All right. Yes, please, by all means.
So, the need for it?
Yeah.
The target is not trying to add more administrative burden to our process. I guess I'm interested in those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so part of the burden that's being alleviated here is for like the end subrecipients, but also if you think about it across multiple FDP institutions, right, we are all iterating and recreating the same process. So theoretically, if we get an entity into the clearinghouse that has completed, like uploaded this information, disclosed the detailed description of their financial system, et cetera, theoretically, that's an entity that is in a better position to be evaluated by potentially another pass-through entity. So, like, theoretically, this is like facilitating like ease of research and awarding of funds in multiple directions through multiple entities. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I think there's probably a spectrum, of how we all go about this.
Sure.
And not everybody has elected to implement a financial questionnaire for a subrecipient. We have different ways of taking the pulse of a prospective subawardee.
I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, that is.
Well,
And like, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, we're looking for some key indicators, and it's great if people are active PEC members, obviously, but then, we're looking for you haven't done as you're registered in SAM, you have single audit. Like, there's some things that kind of reduce risk out of the gate, and we want to say you're low risk out of the gate unless something.
Sure.
Well-
What do you do for those entities that
That
do not
don't.
have a single audit?
Yeah, and that's what
'Cause
we're really.
We're talking about the entities that have no single audit.
Clearinghouse, those that are not subject to single audit, such as a foreign entity. Or nonprofit. Or
Nonprofit.
nonprofit. So for us, it's probably more small organizations. Then we start to look at the project piece of it. Okay, so the information we know about that project, what type of work are they doing? How much money are we giving them? Are they just a local type of organization participating in
Sure.
something larger that we're doing? So, but we don't necessarily send them a whole big batch. We've got kind of one page where we're asking them to tell us
Sure.
the key touch points, and then we really start to look at the project.
So I feel like your philosophical approach is actually super in line with the approach that we took. But I'm super curious to, if I can keep moving and present sort of like what the like snapshot is of what we've got thus far. And then I'm gonna give you my card and we'll talk about like the differences between like where we're at. Yeah, because a lot of these forms that we've all got, right, can be pretty lengthy, pretty arduous even for us to review, right? And oftentimes they're maybe not getting to the nut of like what we really need to understand in terms of risk. So based on that large, list of questions, we boiled it down to like these main categories. So like general financial, accounting, F&A, personnel, procurement, property management, and cost transfer. So here's an example. This is the entirety of the general financial audit and internal control section. It's actually not that long.
Multi-part questions, but yeah, we tried to reduce redundancy and.
Yes. Yeah, so oftentimes we'll start with yes/no questions and then go, depending on the yes or the no, ask something more probing, right? So for instance, on number 1, does your organization have its financial statements reviewed by an independent auditor/accounting firm? And then if no, please provide a copy of or link to the most recent unaudited financials, right? And then in the guidance, which we'll get to, we explain all of these many terms, right, that appear in the questions and the follow-up questions. And then there's guidance for pass-through entities to then evaluate those financials. So, and that's really tiny. I know you all will be able to take a look at it later.
I wanted to provide a visualization of how we are providing guidance for each of the questions and for both of the entities using this potentially.
Should I go ahead and just read the first one real quick? Sure. So again, 1, does your organization have its financial statements reviewed? Then the guidance for the subrecipient is, these financial documents are used by the organization passing through funding to comply with federal regulations to assess the risk of awarding funds to your organization and to verify that your organization has policies and procedures in place to adequately manage the funds. And again, this is kind of a first draft, so we're open to feedback and simplification. And then the guidance for the PTE in reviewing this is audited and unaudited financials are both used in the risk assessment process to identify and assess the ability of the subrecipient organization to handle the funds awarded. Unaudited financials are considered less reliable than audited financials because they are not reviewed and attested to by an independent external entity. They are self-reported. So, and then that's kind of like general commentary on this piece, right? And then the guidance for the if yes and if no is a lot more specific about, for instance, some things from the financial statement that can be considered. Current ratio, current assets to current liabilities determines liquidity. Assets should generally exceed liabilities. So things like this that you learn, right? If you've done this work for years and you get taught it, but you don't generally get like a tip sheet.
Yes. When I think about reducing administrative burden, I mean, I'm often, a subrecipient will call me up and ask for assistance in filling out this form and explaining these terms and jargon in accessible ways for them. So I figured I was going to be developing subrecipient guidance to have, in my institution. Why not do it at a larger level, applicable and available for everyone?
Right. Yeah. So capture this knowledge that like we propagate through all these conversations, right? But let's put it somewhere so people can read it. All right. So that's kind of like the proposal of where we're at. We've got like a full draft that we can provide access to. It's a very
it's
lengthy,
not pretty right now.
Right, yeah, it's a very lengthy Google sheet right now. Question?
So your idea is that if it were piloted and then used, we would possibly get this questionnaire completed and the results or answers would be shared in a database, kind of like the profiles.
Right, and that is certainly a more sensitive question in this area.
I'm wondering how you would get those other places to be willing to let you put their data.
Yes, that is
Changes frequently. If you're working with a small startup business, today I did a set of them, but next year it could be a whole different picture.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
And I think these are issues that we all grapple with. I mean, we've subbed to them, many of them similarly.
Getting people to fill it out and send it to us because they're worried about confidentiality.
Oh, yes.
Sure, and that's something that came up in the first round of feedback from potential subrecipients. There were a few smaller foreign nonprofit entities that suggested options that they might be willing to disclose, like a link that is password protected, right? So there were mitigation strategies. They seemed open to this as a way of, again, actually potentially reducing their burden in terms of completing something that's like very confusing, and oftentimes it's like an admin on their end that has no idea what federal finance terminology means, right?
US federal.
So at least thus far, one positive point of feedback was just the explanatory guidance was seen as like really value added. Yeah, not to like be on a sales tear there, but.
I was wondering, will we be able to see the draft materials prior to deciding whether or not to participate in the pilot?
No, of course, yes.
It's going to be a closely held secret. No, actually.
Do you have a goal for how
So-
many you'd like to see participate?
Yeah, so I think what we can do, and this is occurring to me actually as you're asking that, Jennifer. So Jennifer's question was like, will there be a way to review the full draft for everyone? And absolutely, I think what we can do is put together, like a pretty accessible Word document in that same format. It'll be fairly lengthy, but that way y'all can see in a more understandable way than just our Google Sheet with color coding. What the prospective questions and guidance and such are.
Send them out on the expanded clearinghouse listserv.
Yeah, exactly. And I figure we can send that in conjunction with the survey, where we can just get feedback from folks.
And for those of you that have been involved in the clearinghouse since the beginning, we'll probably follow a similar path the way we did that pilot. So you'll have all the details. You'll be able to think about if you want to participate. Somebody official from your organization is going to have to say, sign on. The way I kind of think about it, and we thought about this from this start, really, when we started to analyze all those forms. Can you guys hear me okay?
Do you want one microphone? There you go.
So just think about it. Let's just say hypothetically that the executive committee ends up deciding that we're going to let non-FDP members in. Okay. So think about it. If they test a financial questionnaire for non-single audit and get to the standard data elements questions you want, then the clearinghouse down the road could become a case of like the very first question that's asked is, are you FDP member or not? Are you single audit or not? And then it'll take you, if you're single audit, you'll fill out the current tabs that are in the clearinghouse. But if you're not, then it takes you to the things that are going to be piloted in this questionnaire. So kind of think about it like that. Again, that's a hypothetical right now because we haven't got past the should we really go for it and let non-FDP in. But they're going to do all the work, the precursor work, just like we did with the Excel spreadsheet, testing out the data fields and the questions, what's really the heart of what everybody wants to ask.
Yes. And I'm real quick going to just add again, this is our contact information. We are super eager to hear from any of you with questions, and also if you're interested in helping us with all of these many pieces remaining. What?
You may want to also put it on the subboard listserv.
Oh yeah, great idea, thank you.
Just because those people
There's a
do a
lot
lot
of
of risk
crossover.
assessments, so they can have some feedback as data elements.
Certainly, I expect so. Bring it, yeah. Cool. And we're going to step down, and Pamela and Lynette are going to come up.
5 minutes left, so if anybody has any other general questions, now's the time. Thank you. Any final questions? Did you guys have any questions, really deep technical questions for Chris that you wanted to ask?
I thought for just a minute you were just going to stop at technical questions and
Oh, not for us. So you're all still feeling good about the clearinghouse? It's working for you? You want us to keep working on it? Keep your data up to date.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Go out, read and use the press release, share that locally at your institutions if you want to. We will be doing kind of a national press release. If you haven't seen it, well, you haven't seen it yet, David Wright's sending out tonight that press release information and an email from Dick to everyone that's on the FDP Maine site. And then similar type of information will start going out to various national organizations and groups after that. And so you may be seeing some national press on this as well.
All right. Thank you all.
Hey.